Hello coders, welcome to part 3 of our Dodgeball app tutorial. In part 2, we added some blocks of code that allow the user to click and drag the cat sprite. In part 3, we'll add some blocks of code that animate the ball, increase the score, and increase the speed as the game is played. We'll also add some functionality to this button to allow the user to restart the game. First, take your mouse to this white space on our workspace and right-click and choose the Collapse Block option. Then we're going to click and drag these blocks to the right side of our screen, being careful not to put them in the backpack or the trash can. The code that we've written is still there, but it is now collapsed to give us some more room to write some new code. All right, we're going to need a new variable. Going to the variables drawer, we're going to grab a global variable that we're going to name score. And that variable will store the score as we play the game. Our score will start out at 0, which I grabbed from my math drawer. And there we go. Next, I need to build a procedure that throws the ball. Coming to my procedure drawer, clicking on procedure, I grab the first block, and I'm going to rename this to throw ball. Each time I throw the ball, I'm going to want to reposition the ball to the top of my screen. You may recall from part 2, we created a procedure to center the ball at the top of the screen. So if I go to my procedure drawer, here we find set ball start position, and I'll click that right inside my new purple procedure block. Next, I'd like to set the ball's heading, give it a direction. I want it to fly down from the top of the screen. So if I go to my ball drawer, clicking on ball, I scroll down, and I find a dark green set ball 1 heading to. I'm going to click and drag that into my purple procedure block. And I'd like my game to have a little bit of variety here so that it throws the ball at some random headings. So if I come to my math drawer here, I can scroll up and I'll find a block that gives me random numbers within a certain range. Let's take a look at how App Inventor handles headings of sprites. App Inventor uses a 360-degree compass rose, much like you would use on a magnetic compass. And on this orientation, it looks like maybe we want a minimum of 220 degrees all the way up to a maximum of 320 degrees to make sure that our ball is always being thrown down towards our cat sprite. Clicking back to App Inventor, I will type in 220 degrees for my minimum and 320 degrees for my maximum. After heading, I'd like to adjust the ball's speed. So back to my ball drawer, I'm going to scroll down. Down towards the bottom, I find this dark green block, set ball 1 speed 2. I'll click and drag that out and position that right below my last green block. And I would like my ball's speed to increase each time a new ball is thrown from the top of my screen towards the cat. To make the ball speed increase, I go to my math drawer, clicking on math and scrolling towards the top. I find an addition block, which will work perfectly. I'll click that into the socket. And I'd like to increase the ball's speed. So coming back to my ball drawer, clicking on the ball, I scroll down and near the bottom, I find a light green block, ball1.speed. That will be clicked into the first socket in my addition block. Through some experimentation, I found that it's helpful to increase the ball's speed by about 5 pixels per second on each new throw. So if I come to my math drawer, I'll scroll up, grab a math number block, and plug that into my second socket. Typing in a 5, I'm all set. Finally, I'd like to be able to show the user that speed as it increases as I play my game. So you might recall we have a label speed component on our user interface. So on the left side, I'm going to go into the label speed drawer. I'm looking for this dark green block called set label speed text 2. I'm going to grab this block and click it into my purple procedure block. And then I'm going to go to my text drawer and grab a join block. This join block will join together the word for the speed as well as the number for the speed. So back to my text drawer, clicking on text, I grab a blank text block and plug that into my first socket, and I type speed, space, enter. Next, I come back to my ball drawer on the left, clicking on ball. I scroll down near the bottom, and I find a light green ball 1 speed block, and that will click into the second socket. Okay, I've taken care of throwing the ball. Now I'd like to be able to update the score. So if I come to my procedure block, I'm going to create yet another purple procedure, and this one is going to be called Update Score Label. I'm going to come to the left side of my screen and look for my label score drawer. Clicking on the label score, I find a set label score text 2. It's a dark green block, and I'll click that into my procedure. I'm going to come back here for another join block in my text drawer. Click that in. I'm going to come back to my text drawer for a blank text block. And much like I did with the speed, I'm now going to type score, space, enter. And the next step is a little tricky. I'm going to take my mouse up here to the top and I'm going to hover over this score variable. And I get two options here. I want the first option. I'll click and drag that into my second socket. So that will update my score. It's a good idea to pause the video here and double check your code against my code here on the screen. Once you're absolutely sure that all of your code is identical to what's presented here in the tutorial, you can right-click on the white space, collapse the blocks, and move them over to the right side of your screen. Our next block is going to be one of the largest blocks of this app. We're going to go to our ball drawer and we are going to create a new ball 1 edge reach block. So that's our third option here. I'm going to drag that out into our workspace. And our ball is going to react differently depending on which edge it reaches. Looking back at how App Inventor handles headings and edges, when this ball flies from the top of the screen and hits the left or right edge of our app, I'd like it to bounce. When it hits the bottom edge of our app and misses the cat, I'd like to increase the score by 1. So these edges have numbers, which helps us to identify which edge is being hit by the sprite. And I'm going to control this with an if-else statement. So in my control drawer, I'm going to click on control. My first option is if, then. I'm going to click and drag this out into my edge reach block. And then I'm going to look for this blue mutator button. If I click on the mutator, I can grab an else statement and drag this else statement to the right into this if spot. That mutates my block and gives me two options, and I'll need two options depending on which edge my ball hits. Next, I'm going to need a comparison block from my math drawer. Clicking on math, I grab this equals block and click that into the if socket. Next, I hover over this edge variable, grab the get edge and click that into the first socket. And next I go to the math drawer, grab a number block, click that into the last socket, and type in -1. -1 is the number that App Inventor uses for the bottom edge of our app. If the ball hits the bottom edge of our app, that means our cat must have successfully dodged the ball and the ball has passed back past the cat. So I would like to increase the score and do a couple other things. So I'm going to come over here to my variables, clicking on variables. I'm going to grab a set block, click that into my first part of my if then statement right next to then. Clicking the drop-down arrow, I'm going to click on Global Score, and I would like to increase the score. So I come to my math drawer, select a sum block, plug that in, back to my variables drawer. This time I grab a get block, get, and plug that into my first socket. Use the drop-down arrow and choose Global Score. Finally, to finish this statement, I go back to the math drawer. I grab a number block, plug that into the last socket, and this will increase my score by 1. So that means each time the ball hits the bottom edge of my screen, edge -1, my global score will be changed to global score +1. I've got 2 more blocks to include here. I'd like to come back to my procedure drawer and grab an update score label so that we can show the user the new score. And then if the ball has landed on the bottom edge and I've successfully dodged it, it's time to throw a new ball. So I come back to my procedures drawer and I grab a call throw ball option. If by chance my ball doesn't hit the bottom edge and hits the left edge or the right edge, this would be an else condition. So for an else condition, I would like my ball to bounce. Bouncing off the left or the right side will keep it heading towards the cat. So I'm back to my ball drawer now, and I'm looking through my ball drawer. And if I scroll down about halfway, I should find this purple call ball 1 bounce. I'm going to drag that out and plug that into my else case. And I want it to bounce off the edge. So I come up here and hover over this edge variable with my mouse. Just hovering gives me 2 options, and I will choose the first option, get edge. I plug that into my socket, and I'm looking pretty good. I think we're going to stop this part of the tutorial here, and in the last part of the tutorial, we'll add our final few blocks of code.